If your competitors, clients, or employees find out that you're selling the company before you tell them and before you want them to know, you're going to have quite the mess on your hands. In this video, we're going to walk through 5 specific things you can do when selling your company to ensure that the different groups of people find out when they are supposed to find out. And if you ultimately decide not to sell the business, they're not going to know anything was even being contemplated. I'm Arthur Petropoulos, Managing Partner and President here at Hillview Partners. We're a middle market investment bank, primarily selling businesses typically making between $1 million and $20 million a year, pre-tax earnings or EBITDA. Step number 1 in selling your business discreetly is don't sell it yourself. Have someone out in front of you. Have someone else making the communications. It creates a level of plausible deniability, but also keeps you in the background. They are out there searching for an objective, but it's somebody else, someone separate from your business. That, in and of itself, will keep things far quieter than if you were making some of the outreach or phone calls or responding to the private equity firms or strategic acquirers yourself. 2, this outreach should be anonymized. And that doesn't mean you're calling people from a phone booth down the street and not telling them who you are or who we would be as the banker, but the opportunity. We reach out to companies and we say, we have an interesting opportunity. We have a company that does a thing in this particular geography, access point for this particular end market, providing these types of services that we think fills a missing puzzle piece for you, Mr. Large Strategic, because you don't have access to this geographic industry, end market, geography, what have it, or you don't have this capability. So again, the outreach should not be, hey, we're selling XYZ company. The outreach should be, we are representing a company that does something that we think could be of interest to you, Mr. Strategic. Again, without the name. Now you could say, hey, look, we're the only company in Jackson Hole that does industrial services of this sort. And so it's important for whoever's doing the outreach, for the investment bankers in a situation, to do it thoughtfully, to say, we're representing a Northeast company, an East Coast company, a Southwest company, a Southeast company, a Midwest company, whatever it may be, but at least you have to run it through a test a few times to make sure that someone can't just easily reverse engineer it. So that's step number 2. Step number 3 is that the objective in itself does not need to be hyper-specific. And people say, what do you mean? I'm going to sell my business. Well, there's a very big difference between reaching out to potential acquirers and saying, we're representing a company that can't wait to sell, is having a yard sale, just wants to get out of this thing, needs to sell, so please, please, please buy it, versus we're representing a company whose ownership has been doing something for multiple decades, and they are now at the phase, as any owner would be every so often, that they're contemplating strategic alternatives, of which one of these could potentially be strategic partnerships, being acquired by a business, a merger, things of that nature. Right? That's the way that it can be communicated to the market, that God forbid if it ever even got out there that these conversations were taking place, you could easily say, well, look, we had an investment banker looking for the data points in the market to see what some of the alternative paths are as we contemplate whether or not we want to monetize some of our ownership or work again for the next 20 years doing the same thing. So who wouldn't, in their reasonable mind, want to evaluate these strategic alternatives every so often? But that's the phrasing and that's the dialogue. So you should not be on someone's mailing list of companies for sale. You shouldn't be in some database or on some website of I must sell my company. It communicates the wrong thing and oftentimes to the wrong people. You need someone, again, going through steps 1 through 3, out there having these dialogues on your behalf, initially on an anonymized basis. And third, evaluating multiple strategic alternatives. A sale is just one of them. Step number 4 is that every party that learns who you are should be subject to a non-disclosure agreement prior to learning the name of their company. And so the cadence, if you will, or the sequencing of selling a business is we craft an anonymized narrative. We reach out to parties that we believe have missing puzzle pieces that our clients can fill, that they would rather buy versus build themselves. And then we have the discussion with them, and if we feel that the potential acquirer is bona fide in the sense that they have experience, that they have real interest, and that they have capabilities, both operationally and financially, to pursue an acquisition, we will then say, great, you seem like you could be a viable party here. prior to us releasing any further information and the name of the company, we need to get a non-disclosure signed. Now, we have a template non-disclosure. That means someone cannot share the information they learned for many years, and that keeps things quiet. The risk of a lawsuit for leaking information will keep people from disclosing it for the most part. Now, we're not naive enough to think that there's not a scuttlebug, and we'll get into that in the last point here. But for this fourth point, it's worth noting that twofold. One, information will be more carefully handled if someone is subject to an NDA. And two, just by virtue of asking someone if they will sign an NDA, or telling them rather that they must sign an NDA to learn the name of a company and to get further information, it will separate the wheat from the chaff. Those that are really interested will say, okay, yeah, fine, send it over, we'll take care of it. Those that are lukewarm will say, can you just tell me a little bit more information prior to getting an NDA? We really don't want to. And then it's a good signal to an investment banker to say, look, it doesn't sound like this is really that interesting to you. We're not really in the business of finding a bunch of maybes here and trying to convince them to do something. We want to find all the yeses. And there's plenty of yeses to be had out there for any business. So therefore, it's a good signal in that regard. And lastly, number 5, and this is the somewhat harsher truth of these processes, in the element that probably requires the most experience, is spoon feed the information. Give people the amount of information they need to get to the next stage of the process and no more. And therefore, the amount of people that you are ultimately sharing the sensitive information with is far less. And logically speaking, the sheer number or lack thereof of people you share sensitive information with will largely determine how many people actually ever know it or how it could leak. If you assume that if you told 100 people a piece of information, that 3 of the people would, even if you got them to pinky promise that they'd never tell anybody, that they're going to do it anyways, well then, presumably, if you told 200 people, you'd have 6. If you told 300 people, you'd have 9, so on and so forth. And therefore, conversely, again, the other way, if you told 50 people, you'd have 1.5 people. And if it was 33, you'd have 1, and you get the point. But the idea is that you want to sequence the information in such a way that you can winnow or narrow the audience so that as you are giving progressively more sensitive information, you are giving it to less people. So what does this practically mean? Well, our business is different than others. We're not the type of investment bank that's going to blast something out to a mailing list of 10,000 people every week and say, please, please buy our company. We'll tell you anything. We're the competitors or probably the people signing the NDAs to learn the names. We are specifically reaching out to roughly 200 to 300 parties in any particular transaction or engagement where we think these are the best buyers who have the missing puzzle pieces. Again, 100 rabbits don't make a horse. So getting someone 25 bad offers is not the same as getting someone 10 good offers. And so in a situation where we bring a company to market, we're reaching out to 200 to 300 parties. From those 200 to 300 parties, if we feel through many, many conversations and phone calls and Zoom meetings that we have 50 or so that are bona fide, capable, experienced, and interested to a sufficient level that they will pay a premium for a business, we will have them sign a non-disclosure agreement. So everybody else that heard about the company on an anonymized basis does not even ever learn the name of the company. They're just excused politely or self-select out of the process. And so for those 50, let's say, they sign a non-disclosure agreement. They then learn the name of the company, and then they get access to a data room. Now, the data room that we put together for these companies is not going to have customer names. It's not going to have employee names. It's not going to have a treasure trove of all of the information that a competitor would want, or that a party that could potentially leak, or hypersensitive information. Now, a lot of times other investment banks will pre-populate the data room with everything, so that way when someone signs the NDA, they just see everything, but we don't think that's appropriate. It must be spoon-fed. So if someone signs an NDA, most of the information that we are going to give somebody prior to asking for an offer on a business is going to comprise of a few things. Financial statements, historically, on a consolidated basis, you're not seeing customer information. Second, customer concentration by year, say top 5, 10 customers. Again, anonymized, customer A, B, C, X, Y, Z. Third, an organizational chart of the people in the company without names, just roles. Who are the people? What do they do? So you have general manager, assistant, salesperson, whatever it might be. So someone can see the people in the business. And then alongside that, we will provide a narrative that usually discusses the processes of the business. Not just the processes, but also the services provided, the products provided, but on a high level basis. So you want buyers to see financial performance and then people, process, product, and that is sufficient to give an offer. So let's say from those 50 people, we get 15 offers. And then from those 15 offers, we think 10 of them are worth further discussing. And from those 10, we have further dialogue where maybe then we give a little bit more information. And then we have 4 people left. And from there, we negotiate down to the singular offer that we want. The point being is, of the 200 to 300 parties, only 50 knew the name of the company. Of those 50 parties, maybe only 10 of them got a second layer of information. And so it's not a harmful amount of information. And in sum, these are the 5 things that will keep a process discrete. Now, we could make another video in the future, and we may, as to kind of how to tell people, when to tell them in terms of the employees of the business, how to present it to the market in terms of what competitors might see, how to introduce the concept to clients. But generally speaking, when selling a business, in order to keep it discreet, in order to keep it quiet, these are the 5 tactical steps that you must take in order to keep things quiet until you don't need them or want them to be quiet anymore. And if, again, for some reason a deal does not happen, if for some reason you change your mind, if for some reason you decide to just continue with the business or go in a different direction, you don't want the world to ever know that you were for sale. So those 5 things, just to recap them. 1, don't reach out directly to potential acquirers. Have other people do it that do it for a job, that do it for a living. 2, reach out anonymously. The outreach should be discussing a company that does a thing in an area that helps people this way that could be interesting because you have this missing puzzle piece. 3, the objective is not a fire sale of a business. The objective is evaluating strategic alternatives, and potentially one of those is selling, merging, or partnering. 4, all parties must sign an NDA before knowing the name of the company. This is a de facto winnowing exercise, shakes the trees and the bad leaves fall off. And secondly, it will have an impact on how people behave and will have some legal force. And 5, spoon feed the information. Don't tell people more information than they need to know at the next step in order to do the thing you need them to do. You must know, we know in every deal, how much information is really necessary to get a high-level offer out. It's less than you think. And that's the thought for today. How to sell a business quietly, discreetly, to get to the result that you want, and then to keep your control of when the messaging gets out. Hope the week continues to go well for everyone. Keep pushing forward. God bless. We'll see everyone next time.